Chaos! That's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the Grand Alliance. It's been about a year since I last looked at the kind of allies that Chaos Warbands would take. And a lot has happened, really. The game has got far more mature. Our understanding of the game has got a lot better. Our understanding of what kinds of units are good, what kind of units are not so good, and why has improved. So that's all we're going to be looking at. I'm going to be going through the most used Chaos allies that people are bringing in their warbands today. We're going to be going through what makes them tick, why they're being brought, and how we're going to use them on the battlefield. But before I get into that, as always, if you like what you see, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to throw some more support my way, just as a reminder, you can join me here on YouTube as a member. You can check out Patreon, where you get to see exclusive behind the scenes content. You get to see videos early. You get some kind of say into the different kinds of topics I'm looking into. Or alternatively, if that's not for you, you can check out Streamlabs and throw some support my way. But with all that out of the way, let's get into the video. Okay, so we are talking about Grand Alliance Chaos. We're going to start with the damage dealers. Unlike what we've seen in Grand Alliance Destruction, Chaos is really much more limited in scope in terms of the kinds of damage dealers that they can bring and at the different points levels that we're going to be seeing. Personally, I feel that if you do want to get a really big, really beefy damage dealer in there, they are on the slightly more expensive side. But that being said, I feel like the stats are basically in the right places that you want, and there aren't really any wasted points when we're going to be looking at these models. So we're going to start off with the Slangor Slakehorn. It's 225 points, so on the cheaper end of the scale. A 4-4-3-5 damage profile. I really like the 3-5. I think it adds a lot of consistency to its attacks, and it really allows the Slakehorn to be able to clear those big waves of chaff that you might want it to be able to kill. On top of that, the Slakehorn itself, being part of Slaanesh, it gets a bunch of different movement abilities to be able to get there and to get into combat. It's got a plus 3-inch move double on the next move, so that will put it up to 9 inches. Plus, its 2 inches of actual range is an 11-inch threat range, which is very good. On top of that, it's also got an additional bonus move double, where if it's within 6 inches of your opponent, it can make that bonus move, and then it basically gets to attack. 8 attack, strength 4, 3-5. That's good stuff. Continuing on with the theme of fast fighters and how they're going to get there, we've also got the Varangard. It's expensive, 285 points. There are bunch of different builds, but I personally like the Demon Forge Blade simply for that strength 5 and the very respectable 3-6 damage profile. The Varangard itself is movement 10, so of course it can get to where it needs to go, so it's actually faster than the Slakehorn, but of course we're going to be paying more points for that. Now, both the Slakehorn and the Varangard both have an ability whereby if they kill enemy fighters, they'll be able to make additional actions. And then on top of that, we've got the Varangard itself. It's got the Relentless Killer's double, which will give it up to an extra 3 attacks when it does actually charge and when it fights. So if you're looking for a very fast, very consistent fighter, just to be there to be able to do damage, point it at a thing, and hopefully get rid of it from the board, I think the Slakehorn and the Varangard are both very good choices. Finally here, we've got the Fomorid Crusher. It's 260 points. It's not slow by any means. It still has movement 5, which is very good. But just look at the rest of its stats. It's got toughness 6, it's got 35 wounds, and those attacks itself, 3-6 with a 4-8 damage profile. On average, it's going to be hitting twice with those 3 attacks, and it will do 8 damage, which is enough to one-shot most chaff units. What we're going to be wanting to do most of the time with the Fomorid Crusher is use Divine Blessings to give it that extra attack. It'll go up to 4, and there's basically very few things in the game that will be able to stand up to it in a one-on-one fight. Most things will be winning it on 5s, if not 4s if they're strong enough, and most things that run into it will basically be crumpled under that strength 6 and the massive 4-8 damage profile. You can see it from the damages that we've got here. If we look at the average weighted damage for these 3 fighters, Fomorid Crusher right there at the top, 9.5 average points of damage per attack. Then comes the Slakehorn at 7.33, again, because it's got all those attacks, and it does have that 3-5 damage profile. And finally, we've got the Varangard, who is coming in 3rd place, but still with a very respectable 7.13 average damage. Of all of these three fighters, if you were going to pick one of them, you probably would pick the Fomeroid Crusher. It's the most points efficient. It's the kind of fighter that you can just put somewhere on the board and it can basically take care of itself. It doesn't really need dice to do its damage. It doesn't really need anything else. It just needs to be there and it needs to run into a thing and it needs to be able to hit it. You'll be seeing a lot of Fomeroid Crusher Vanguard combos when you look at the different kinds of top tier and the top performing Chaos lists. The reason for this is that between these two fighters, they've got an incredibly tough, incredibly high damage dealer, and they've got an incredibly fast damage dealer. The two of them combined cover all of your bases in terms of the amount of damage that you would want to do in a particular game, and between the both of them, they are very versatile in what they can do. So if you are a Chaos faction that has extremely cheap chaff units, so let's say you're playing Demons of Nurgle, let's say you're playing Horns of Hashut, for example, any of these warbands that can put relatively cheap fighters on the board, that can boost up the size of your warbands to maybe 8, possibly even 9 fighters, you can bring the Fomeroid and the Vanguard together, and they will both do the job that you need to do, and they will essentially carry the games for you. Linked to these damaged characters, we've got a couple of hybrid characters here that I wanted to go over. One, we got the Dark Oath War Queen, and secondly, we have the Splintered Fang Trueblood. Starting with the War Queen, 175 points, so a lot cheaper than the Slighorn and the other different kinds of options that we've seen. A 5-4-2-4 damage profile, which is, it's okay, it's not entirely terrible. I think the 5 attacks really help the War Queen push its damage out to respectable levels. But what the War Queen does have is her Spurred by the Gods triple, and it's essentially an AoE attack boost, and it's the best type of AoE attack boost that Chaos has available to it. It's got no caveats on it. It's got no additional requirements, let's say making you kill a guy or do something or go somewhere. You just use it and all of your friends get +1 attack. Now, it does specify friendly fighters, not visible friendly fighters. So what that does also mean is that the War Queen, if it uses Spurned by the Gods, it's within 3 inches of itself. So she's going to be getting that +1 attack. And when she attacks, she'll be going for 6-4-2-4, which is a very good damage profile. On top of that, if you didn't want to use Spurred by the Gods, maybe you're out of position, or there's something else going on and you need to mop up 1 or 2 different chaff units, the War Queen does also have a triple whereby if she kills somebody, she can make a bonus move action and then a bonus attack action. With her 5 attacks and their inbuilt decent damage, it's perfectly reasonable to expect her to be able to kill something like an 8 wound or maybe even a 10 wounds chaff model, and then use your triple, get your move, and then get your extra attack. So yeah, overall, the War Queen, it's a very solid choice for the points that you're paying. Secondly, here we've got the Trueblood, 170 points, a little bit cheaper, 4-4-2-5 damage profile, which is nice. It's similar to the War Queen, trades in 1 attack for that extra point of crit. The Trueblood does have 2-inch range, which is very good. So it will generally allow the Trueblood to stay out of trouble for a little bit longer, sitting at that 2 inches, poking things with 1-inch range. But the real thing that you're going to be bringing it for is the Ensnaring Net double. It's the only net ally available to Chaos, and it's really, really good. Like I said, it's a double. You pick a visible enemy fighter within 3 inches, so it's a pretty long range net when you come to think about it. Most fighters aren't going to be hitting you back with a 3-inch range, and which effectively means that your Trueblood can walk up to a thing, throw its net, and then poke at it from 2 inches, which is very good. And until the end of the battle round, that fighter can't make move actions or disengage actions. Most other nets in the game, you're going to have to roll a dice to be able to actually use the ability. Whether it's a 2 or more, or 4 or more, or whatever, the Trueblood gets around all of that. It's effectively the best net because it's always going to go off. And that's really why the Trueblood, we still do see it in play, despite its relatively high points cost and relative squishiness with only toughness 4 and 20 wounds. Kind of following on from this, we've got the utility monster type thing, as I like to call it, the Mindstealer Spheranx. The Mindstealer has kind of dropped off a little bit in the last year, really for favor of the more direct damage dealers, the Fomeroid Crusher and the Vanguard, but I still think it's very good. A 4-5-2-5 damage profile is not bad at all. It'll be winning most things on 3s, which is nice. It's got movement 8, so it's much faster than something like the Fomeroid. Toughness 5 still, so most things are going to be winning on 5s. And it's got 30 wounds. So It's got an all-round profile, which I think is fairly decent for what you're getting. But the real reason you're bringing it is for its utility as well as its damage. So it does, just like the True Blood, have a net on a double, telepathic threatening. So you're going to be picking an enemy fighter within a number of inches equal to the value of the ability. So higher doubles will get you more range on this, which is very useful. And you're going to roll your dice, and in a roll of 3 or more, you'll net the fighter, can't move, can't disengage. So as a net on a fairly tanky platform goes, I think it's pretty decent. A 3 or more is better than 50% success rate. So yeah, I like the Mind Stealer. On top of that, it's got this big flashy quad charm, which I have used a couple of times. I've used it on a Chimera once, which was fairly funny. We're going to be picking a visible enemy fighter within a number of inches of this fighter equal to the value of this ability. So again, bigger quads, bigger range. That fighter cannot activate nor make reactions during this battle round. This is potentially game winning. If you walk up with your Mind Stealer and you have your quad ready for you, run into a fighter, you can attack it. If you kill it, you kill it. If you don't, you don't. And you are also simultaneously in range of your opponent's Fomoroid or an Achillean King or any other really big fighty character, or alternatively, any very important support character that the enemy warband needs for their abilities to go off. You can walk up to it, use your quad, shut that fighter down for the turn. So it's potentially very strong, but again, we don't like to build our warbands around quads because they are not the most reliable things in the world. However, despite that, I do think that the Mind Stealer, it's got enough going for it that it is a pretty good pick for most all-comers warbands. The final one that I've left out here is Ogroid Myrmidon. The Myrmidon, I think, has fallen off quite a bit again in the last year, with players really looking for things like the Fomoroid Crusher and the Varangard to use instead. Again, it's mainly a damage fighter. It'll do what you need it to do, but overall, I do think that if you want something specifically for damage, go for the Fomoroid. If you want something with a little bit more utility, you can go with the Mind Stealer here. Finally, one thing that Chaos does have going for them that not very many other Grand Alliances actually do have are pull abilities. And they've got 2 fighters that can do that. They've got the Great Brace Shaman and they've got the Slaughter Priest. The Slaughter Priest comes in a couple of different options. I chose the Blood-Bathed Axe here because I feel like it gives you most bang for your buck, and it's got a very good damage profile to go with it. If you're short on points, you can go with the Great Shaman. If you have the points to spend, you can go with the Slaughter Priest. Both abilities are very similar. You've got Devolve and Bloodbind, both are doubles. Devolve works on a fighter within 6 inches, Bloodbind works on a fighter within 8 inches, but what you're going to be doing, you're going to be picking that fighter, and it's going to make a bonus move action directly towards the fighter that used the ability, so the Great Brace Shaman or the Slaughter Priest in this case. They're going to be making that move as if they were jumping, so they'll do things like jump off of ledges, off of bridges, over things, so that's very good. And the move is going to be a range of a number of inches equal to the value of the ability. So again, higher doubles means those enemy fighters will be moving further. On top of that, what they're able to do is they're able to move away from enemy fighters that they would otherwise be engaged with. So if they were within 1 inch of an enemy fighter, Devolve or Bloodbind allows them to move away from that. This is extremely powerful. Both of these abilities, when combined with larger warbands, allow you to really dictate the flow of the game, and especially if you're doing things like objective missions, you can pull enemy fighters off of objectives. If they have treasure, you can pull enemy fighters with treasure back towards you, especially if they've already activated and are otherwise unable to do something off the back of that. So yeah, that's why these 2 fighters have really done very well over the last year, and I'm sure that we're going to be seeing more of them in your lists. One point about the Great Brace Shaman, its range ability isn't bad. It's 2 shots, which is kind of sucky. It's okay. Strength 3, but 3/6 damage is actually quite nice. And what you can do is you can use Divine Blessings to add +1 strength to any of your range attacks. So suddenly the Great Brace Shaman, if you had your 15 points spare, he becomes 160 points, but his attack goes to 2, 4, 3, 6, which suddenly makes it a lot more reliable. It allows you to wound those toughness 3 fighters on 3s, which is very good, and maybe you'll do 6 damage, or if you're lucky and you crit, you'll do something like 6 or 9 damage. So we're seeing a big resurgence in other Grand Alliances of these kind of characters who can do high amounts of poke damage from a long way away, and I think the Great Brace Shaman might be a decent enough contender to do something like that. Again, if you had the points to boost it with Divine Blessings. Okay, that's it from me for today. Thank you very much for watching. A bit of a shorter one this time. Really what's happened over the last year is that all those weird and wacky Chaos allies that people have been testing out, they've kind of been weeded out, and the list that people are using in their competitive warbands has really been condensed down into something very specific and very efficient for the points that you're going to be paying. Like I said before, if you're running a lot of very cheap chaff and you have access to that chaff in your warband, you'll see a lot of Varangard Fomroid Crusher combos. If you're running a more fighty warband, you want to go a little bit more of a controlling style, maybe we'll see a Maya Stealer or something like the Great British Shaman. It's always very good. But yes, thank you very much for watching. As always, if you like what you see, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know down in the comment section below what you thought about the different kinds of allies that people are using today. If you have any ideas about the kinds of allies that you like to use in your Chaos Warbands, that's always something that I like to see. Or if you think that I'm completely crazy and what I've chosen is complete garbage, please put that down in the comments and we'll have a good talk about it. But yes, thank you very much for watching. I've been Itan, this has been Off Meta Musings, and I'll see you next time.